Hey guys, we all read research papers no matter what type of research we do, but the question is, how can you make the most of that experience of sitting down, grabbing a research paper, and getting the most out of it? That's what is interesting for you. Today's video is all about three things I do when I read a research paper. So without further ado, let's get into it. Number one is all about going straight to the methods, because quite often when we do read a research paper, a lot of the times we're looking at the methods section for comparison to the methods we use, finding new methods, comparing the methods to other papers, because we know that the methods or the protocols, how somebody does their research, it's a core essence as to why we look at research papers. So funny enough, even though I'm thinking the title is quite interesting, I don't even read the abstract or introduction. I go straight to the methods to see all these methods of interest, because if the methods are interesting, then I know that the data from those methods will be actually quite important. So I look to see that, are they similar? Have they got a different variation to the method that I'm using? Or there's something that I could try? Or there's something that I've seen before, but this is a new version of it? Is it something completely new? Could I actually try it in my lab the next day? What reagents do I need? What materials do I need? What version of software do I need? So I look at those type of things straight away to see then if the data from this is then usable, because I could potentially reproduce this data or look at something similar. Because the title is really interesting, but then the data is actually very different. The easy way to look at that is look at the method section. Then know that even though this paper might be really interesting, it won't be super useful for me, because the methods might be something completely different to what I am actually used to or what I am actually expecting. Number two is quite obvious, but it's the notion of journal analysis. Now, we often quite look at the journals of the papers that we are reading just to make sure that it is reproducible, it's not a predatory journal, it's not a impact factor that is too low perhaps, that might not be yielding quality peer reviewed research articles. So it's something of a good standard. But sometimes what we don't forget is to read or look at the outputs of that particular journal for the past 6 months. Now, this is incredibly important. The reason why is that a lot of the time when we're reading papers, we're also in the back of our mind trying to think, could this be a journal we could actually publish in? Now, the best way to understand that is looking at the recent outputs over the past 6 months to give an idea of the direction, the scope of the research, because you might be reading one paper right now that's actually really interesting, but looking at it 3 months down the line, or 3 months before, or 4 months before, there actually might be more interesting papers, even more suited to the one that you're reading, to give you a better flavour as to what that journal actually produces. One paper is not really a good sample size. You can actually get a few more. So when you are looking at a paper, and the first thing you look at, and once you've read some bits and bobs like the methods, and you want to do a quick browse of the journal, keep in the back of the mind that just to scroll a few months before, just to have a flavor as to what that type of journal is producing on a longer term basis. So you can see that this is a journal you can actually put on your separate note list as a journal you might want to publish in, because that should always be a factor in our mind when we are reading papers, especially from a particular journal. Could we actually be one of those people that publish in it? Number three is actually all about author capture. And what I mean by this is that when we are finding some paper that's actually quite interesting, we think the methods are really good, we know that the journal is actually quite interesting, we're starting to read a bit of the abstract and introduction, and we're starting to see that this is actually quite a useful paper. Note down the authors straight away, at least a corresponding author who should have their email address as part of the paper. And if you make a separate Google Sheet, notes, whichever kind of format you use, then when you're trying to find, that author, because you might want to ask them the questions, something that we should do more often, it's then easy to find. You don't have to find that, open up the PDF. You can copy the title in that sheet. Next to that title should be the name. Next to that name should be the email address. And you can contact that person to say, I remember this is this that you did in that paper. Is it possible to get a bit more insight as to how you came about this? Or how did you do this? Because it might not be super obvious or clear in the actual paper itself. And this is something I really underutilized during my PhD time. I would spend so much effort trying to figure out something when I could potentially just email the author and I may or may not get a response. But it's an avenue that I didn't really explore too much that I wish I did. So if you are watching this, if you are in your master's, PhD, or even if you're a postdoc, don't forget to utilize this avenue of emailing the authors of the papers that you read quite often and you're using quite a lot as a template. They quite often than not are very approachable to have a discussion and compare or contrast experimentations or protocols or ideas that you have. So don't forget to email the authors. So guys, those were some tips and tricks in regards to reading any research paper and trying to get a little bit more of information and juice out of it. If you do find these little videos useful, do consider liking, commenting, and subscribing, because it will help me and the channel out a lot, so I can try and grow and help even more researchers just like yourself. However, I shall see you in the next one. Take care.